Ego might have got me started with podcasting, but purpose has kept me going. And most creators don't realize how closely those two things align. Honestly, when I first started my own podcast for my business, I didn't really have a lot of thought put into it about what I wanted to achieve in the long run. I don't think a lot of people do. And you know what? That's okay. I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. There are no right answers. Everybody works on their own path, and we all have our own journey to go on. And podcasting might well be something for your journey. I think whilst it's okay to start off without a plan too far in advance, you quickly need to get to a point where you find your passion within what you're doing. Ego, I get a lot of people come to me and say things like, I saw these other people on stage, I saw them up there, and I thought, do you know what? I can add as much, if not more value than these people on this stage. How can I get up there? How can I showcase my authority and credibility in a way that I have control over? And that's the start of their podcast journey. That's fine. That's brilliant. I love it. I think that validation, though, needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, because eventually, when you get into the thick of recording your episodes and speaking with your guests, that moment quickly starts to evaporate in your mind. It's hard work sometimes. You've got to keep motivating yourself. You've got to have an end goal in sight. And I think when you realize what that vision for your podcast is, that's when the quality of your work really starts to ramp up. And I've mentioned before on this newsletter that I did the same thing with MarketPulse, right? Like, I started off with one vision for the podcast. I realized I wasn't enjoying it at around episode 50 or 52. I probably should have changed before then, but I didn't. And I suffered for the last 10, 15 episodes. It was really hard to get through them. But now that we've changed the direction for season 2, one, it becomes a lot easier for me to identify great guests for the show who add amazing value for our audience, but also are a great connection for my own network. And so we can stay in touch. And there are lots of other benefits to having them as guests on your podcast. But more than that, once I'd made that pivot, the views for the podcast went through the roof. They're still growing now. And we're probably 5-6 months into that new season. They're massively growing now. So I love it. So you've got to let that purpose, whatever that is, outgrow the ego that you started with, right? Let go of what it was that you wanted to start the podcast for in the first place. That's your motivator, it's your start point. That's brilliant. But when I talk to people, a lot of the time they're worried about, how do I get sponsorship? How do I monetize this podcast? And that's the wrong way to go about it. The wrong way to be thinking about things. Sponsorships happen because you've built a great podcast. They're not the vision for your podcast. And a lot of people forget about the power of having the right guests who are connectors in the world of your ideal clients on their show. They forget about providing a fantastic experience for their guests, which increases your own credibility and authority with those people. And they forget about the conversations that a podcast can generate. The ability to tag that guest in your own posts, to share audiences, to be like, those are all the real ROIs. You only get to that if you've got a strong vision for what you're trying to achieve with your podcast. It doesn't need to be anything glamorous, and you can absolutely, as with your own personal motivations and why, you can add to that as you go along. And I've certainly done that over the years. I don't think there's ever a point of perfection, and you certainly can't reach that point of perfection ahead of the launch without a lot of money, and to a certain extent even with the money, because you end up with other people's opinions of what your visions should be. And I think if you're going to do a podcast, it needs to be your vision. It needs to be you. It needs to be unique to you. It helps you find your unique process for your podcast also. So being able to, I spoke to the wonderful Alison Schmidt, Dr. Alison Schmidt, on my podcast the other day, and she said that she asks her guests, her show's called the Unconventional Leaders Podcast, and she asks her guests to describe themselves with 3 words. I think that's incredible. What a different take on things, and how unusual for the guests to be able to have to think about that and come up with their own words. So every podcast needs its own differentiator, but I do believe that's aligned with your vision. And I think it's very hard to find that vision before you launch. So get launched, go with imperfect, start out any way you can, do the best job you can, improve over time, but always then be looking towards that goal in the distance as to what do I want to leave as a legacy behind after this podcast. I'll see you next week on the Content Classroom.